it's either all-out aggression or it's all-out, let's build carriers, let's build Tempest, let's sit in our bases, and let's see how long the first match of the day can go.
Yes, I'm feeling that as well. In the bottom right for Team Exxon, he is Gerald.
And in the upper left-hand side from Clash, we have got the red Protoss Hellraiser.
You know, when I do think of Romanticide, though, I think of games where, like, someone tries to kill each other in the mid-game. You know, like a good old gateway proxy with Blink, and then maybe even straight up like a kind of 1.5 base proxy pylon continuously warping in, like those types of things, right? It's not like super committed, you know, but it's you know, definitely committed. And then the game just keeps going because it like barely glances off each other. I feel like that's been most of the games, I guess I'll say, because it does seem like PvP appreciates Romanticide. I guess the way that the terrain works, I don't know. I see it a lot chosen in this matchup. And it almost always seems to be like someone wants to end the game. Someone doesn't want to play out 20 minutes, but then inadvertently, that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, it's a tough map to attack on, right? You know, you got 3 bases, super safe. The 4th base is set back as well in the choke point. And then whenever you take a base from there, you actually just kind of step in like a little bit further forward, which as you get larger armies is obviously easier to do and safer to do. So every base kind of comes along here quite easily. Like there's nothing that's like, oh no, like how am I going to get this one up and running? So yeah, you really can just end up playing a long game, even if one guy's trying to kill the other guy. You know, they will just maybe not find the openings that they need. That's very possible on a map like this one.
Well, we already got a little bit of a difference. So Geralt hid his pylon, and now Hellraiser has to do the age-old question of PvP, like is it real, is it not? And then Geralt's going to go into some Adept pressure, which actually might, you know, further scare Hellraiser, right? If you see Adept as an opener, it's, you know, one of the more common openers to go into a 1-base Stargate as well, which is actually what Hellraiser's doing off of Stalkers. But it's something that Geralt's not going to be able to see. You wait for that, you know, probe to leave, and yes, he did not see that. So Geralt's not going for a Stargate, to be clear. And if he is, it'd be quite later than Hellraiser, because he has to still take care of this probe. But Hellraiser going for the Stargate, I mean, that could actually get him a pretty nice early game lead. Geralt's apparently not going to be able to do very much of these Adepts unless he, plans a long path around, knowing the Stalkers are already there on the hunt, or even just simply coming across the map to do their own damage.
Yeah, and, you know, these Stalkers show up, they poke around a little bit, the Adepts aren't there, there's a Stalker sentry at home, so you're already under a bit of pressure here, right? And it's suddenly you're already thinking about, oh, let's defend this. Maybe you don't think so much about the Oracle. So some things to think about as we do have Hellraiser is currently locked out of his base, but that means that also the Adepts can't get in. So it's kind of a win-win for the moment. Otherwise, I think we look at this right now, and at least there is a shield battery on the way from Gerald, right? Which means that he should be able to realistically hold against the first Oracle. It's whether that second Oracle kind of teams up and finds an opening as well.
Exactly, that's when things get really scary. An attempt to take out a Stalker didn't really work out. I think perhaps with the information gathered from the Adepts, the later Nexus, he's probably just assuming, right? Confirming, really. I think the shield battery's coming down just at a safe timing, and then it was like, oh yeah, no Nexus, it's got to be a Stargate. But basically, Geralt, not too concerned about not using his hallucination. Try to get the force field, does help take out the Stalker. Eventually traded it out, and now he gets that, like, just if there wasn't confirmed before, the real confirmation on that Oracle as it takes out the Adepts. And Geralt's going to go right into a Twilight Council. So you don't really have to fear, like, a super fast Dark Shrine if they have an Oracle, right? So you don't have to worry about detection quite yet. And ideally, you don't have to worry about taking too much damage from those Oracles either, right? It's no longer really terrible if you warp in Stalkers, where at one point it used to be because you were going to go into Mortal Charge Archon. Now warping in Stalkers is okay. Plus, you start blink faster than your opponent. That's the nice thing about this. But Forge is a little bit later. That could be where Hellraiser gets back in this game, but the Oracles can't do damage.
Wow, these Oracles do find an opening. The Stalkers were sat at the front. The Oracles just fly straight into the main, and they don't even take whole damage, just shield damage. And those 6 probes, but the Adepts get in at the same time. I mean, okay, there's at least Stalkers here to stop the Adepts. They didn't shade into the mineral line, so this is going to be held off. This is really good for Hellraiser, and that's always the threat of those Oracles, right? 2 Oracles, all it takes is you to be out of position, and this time Geralt was nowhere near where he needed to be, and instantly 6 probes are dead. And now you're just playing from behind. You know, that faster blink ever so slightly, that doesn't make up for 6 probes. And then Hellraiser's got +1 attack already started, so that's another advantage Hellraiser will hold here. Good little start for him after finally getting something done with the Oracles.
Yeah, yep, I can't disagree with that. The Oracles are just doing a fabulous job. And the fact that they're still alive and healthy is really scary. That's not just more probe damage in the future. It's having Revelation later down the line as well, having that perfect scouting. And then if we do get the Disruptors, I mean, they are very helpful for that phase as well.
Right, I feel like sometimes these 2 Oracles, they dive in and they get 6 probes, but you lose an Oracle. So you trade out. The fact that they are full HP still, they're still as much as a threat as they ever were. So, yeah, this is really like best case scenario for Hellraiser with those Oracles. It's a great point to bring up because if you get 6 probes and you don't then have vision, well, you know, then Gerald can play around it. He can maybe do something to get back in the game. That's a nice catch as well. Another benefit of the Oracle, Stasis Ward and the probe on the 3rd.
And Gerald does want to grab that 3rd. I mean, if he wasn't getting a Forge, if he had a Pylon and Proxy, I'd be like, well, maybe just try and warp in while they're, you know, getting everything else and then try and find an opening. But he's already dedicating to trying to catch up basically in the macro game. This Nexus was supposed to come down, and now it's finally on the way. But yeah, half as slow as Hellraiser's, not a great sign. That +1 also like a good 40, 50 seconds behind. Geralt basically has no advantages. And it looks like Hellraiser is going to try and kill him before he can get to that very awkward and comebacky phase of Disruptors, which is a long ways off anyways, because Geralt has to be scared of exactly what Hellraiser's doing, which is getting a decent amount of gateways and then just kind of just like abusing him and bullying him, right? So it's not going to be the most threatening thing until we have like a Warp Prism available or again a Proxy Pylon from Hellraiser. But if Hellraiser wanted to, if he was able to scout correctly and he's got an hallucination going to the main right now that like, oh, my opponent, it's not going to have many units. He could try and even just Stalker, you know, run around with Stalkers. He could wait for charge and actually threaten the attack on the 3rd base or in the natural. It's a much scarier game for Geralt, as he's the one that's really going to be reacting and trying to catch up.
Yeah, I actually love it for Hellraiser again. Just, I feel like when you get the Stalker charge and you get maybe an attack upgrade lead, there's so much you can do. Like, Geralt's got to be so careful with defending. You know, you can't pop your shield battery overcharge too early because otherwise, you know, maybe Hellraiser just backs away and he can come in again and still hit that timing. Or maybe, you know, he can just target down the battery. There's so many easy to make wrong decisions, whereas the aggressor, you sort of just look and you're like, oh yeah, I can fight this, or, you know, I can just relocate around here. You're right, the defender's definitely got a lot more to do, or it's a lot scarier of a position to be in. And he's going to go up to Robo Base. That's going to be Gerald's advantage, right? That he'll get to Disruptors first, and maybe that will help him out a little bit. The question is kind of surviving up until then, as the 4th base comes down from Hellraiser. Seems like he won't be overly aggressive. He does have a backup plan to play a longer game. And if that's the case, then I'm not as worried for Gerald as I was kind of alluding to being.
I'm a little surprised that Hellraiser didn't try and at least move out once his hallucination saw like, oh, he's actually building probes. Oh, he is, you know, he doesn't have 8 gateways already. And that's kind of like a fake 3rd Nessus. No, he actually just stayed at home. He kept on building stasis traps as well. So Hellraiser is playing a very defensive game. Now, this is maybe him just getting farther ahead, right? Like not trying to play around and miscalculate what his opponent is actually investing into. But I do think that giving your opponent the opportunity to go into Disruptors is always that opportunity for them to come back, more so than just the pure numbers game, right? Of having that many Stalkers or having charge over no charge. But I want to add that Hellraiser, you know, we talked about him doing Void Rays and all that. I remember last time, you know, I was casting and you were hosting, Wardy, and they didn't do it. And then on Romanta's side, I remember specifically that he was a big fan of like basically pushing off Disruptors as long as possible, right? Like he was playing that just run around, rebuild the army style, you know, that's less, you know, tech. It's but it's also less expensive and it has more mobility, and he did a pretty good job with that. So it seems to be just the way he likes to play. But there's no arguing that Disruptors are good. You know, if you get to enough Disruptors, you're supposed to be the one that's better off.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the logical way to play PvP, right? Everyone just goes Disruptors. I'm really intrigued to see what Hellraiser does about it, because I always feel like, you know, the runaround game, well, maybe it should have already started by now. And yeah, he's going to end up on that faster dock trying to help him out as well. Let's see what he can do. Maybe right now when there's still only 2 Disruptors, but it's so dangerous. If you blink in for 2 Disruptors and then the next 2 are already up the ramp and they fire, well, your Stalkers just die. So it's dangerous, or it's difficult even to find the right fight to take advantage of the low Disruptor count, and then before you know it, it's no longer a low Disruptor count. So yeah, especially on this map, it's... Well, let's see how Hellraiser approaches it, because right now I don't really like where it's at. I like some of the other things he has, like the blink DTs on the way up and so on. That's always going to be useful. It's just, what does this mass of stalkers give you that having disruptors wouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, he did use this eventually very effectively against Mana, I believe it was, right? I'm getting serious deja vu, so either I'm really misremembering or I'm actually remembering correctly. Like, it was a great game. There was a stable 4 base with a guy who was theoretically getting to the better army, you know, a decent number of disruptors. And then as soon as Mana moved out, Hellraiser started to actually kind of use his mobility advantage and started to make the game really a little more topsy-turvy, started to find the disruptors out of position or just simply unguarded because it was 8 disruptors, yes, but only 6 stalkers, you know, guarding them, so that's not really enough. And I don't know how much of this is really a dependable playstyle, I guess is the way I'll put it. Like, it just seems like disruptors, although, yes, they're a little bit, you know, I don't know if they're just, you know, I don't know if you can actually count on disruptors 100% of the time, right? They're either hit or miss, literally. But I do think they're more dependable than... yeah, exactly. Something like this, where you lose suddenly just 15 stalkers, right? And then it might be game over. But that was one great shot. He's going to win another one. Disruptors getting awfully far ahead of themselves. And this is where Hellraiser really did start to find advantages against Mana. That bottom left, exactly the same tactic, basically. A ton of DTs and a ton of Zealots. This time going to a third Nexus. There's a couple of units, actually more than a couple of units, and static defense. And that is going to be safe for now. But when you have that many DTs with Blink, I mean, is anything truly safe?
No, nothing is truly safe, but if Gerald just sits back, right, Hellraiser almost wants to bait Gerald into moving forward too quickly, right? Because that's where he wins, because then the DTs do step behind you. That's when the Zealots do get to charge in. But what if Gerald just sort of sits back defensively and doesn't move back out as much, builds up into carriers, the Stargate's on the way? Yeah, okay, you maybe want to try and get toward a 5th base, but I think you can even start doing this on 4th base. If 5th gets cancelled a couple times, that's okay, because you are eventually ending up on a better army here. And those extra bases of Hellraiser don't count for much, although this is weird. These Stalkers apparently just weren't figured out, so he's going to find all of the Disruptors, and they all go down. Even the last one, it gets a couple of units. The DTs are deflected, but obviously you just lost the entire advantage that you maybe had in some way as Geralt. Now you're fighting with less Stalkers versus more Stalkers, and that doesn't work out so well.
I thought that was intentional, you know, as far as the Disruptors went, I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
That was definitely not. Getting a bit of AI there, perhaps, trying to go over that bridge. Very, very awkward. Geralt, surprising little reaction to losing all of his Disruptors. But I guess he doesn't die from there, right? I mean, you were kind of saying, like, oh, if you get your 5th denied for a little while, it's not so bad. I feel like that was the one big mistake allotted. You know, if you lose another 8 Disruptors, okay, maybe it's not a great game for you. But
yeah.
That one, okay, we'll let you have that one. The game does continue on, and Geralt still overall is like, you know, really only, there's very little resources lost overall in this game. So as we move for Geralt into Fleet Beacon, I wonder if he still is getting to the best composition. You know, if better is Disruptors, best is going to be that Air Toss. Yeah,
no, it's, we've seen how good carriers and stuff can be, right? So I still like his progress, just... I mean, the fact he has to rebuild the Disruptors basically stops him from building the air army, right? And now he gets baited to the left-hand side. Stalkers dive in on the right, and now a 4th base goes down. Now things are going a little bit too wrong, right? Now you're really taking a bit too much damage all the time. There's a lot of stack defense here. Honestly, I wouldn't even mind these DTs, like trading out a couple cannons, then just blinking away. But yeah, Hellraiser's just going to keep on testing the waters. As long as Geralt doesn't mind from this 4th right now, I mean, this is obviously fantastic. You know, that speaks for itself. He's trying to get a couple Tempests up, but... You know, 2 Tempests isn't going to be a game changer here. If you got up to like 5, 6 air units, that's when we start talking.
They're really not safe for a little while. You know, either they're going to have to be over a lot of stack defense, which he's struggling to put up on further bases, or they're going to have, you know, super large numbers, which will take a while to get to. Geralt's trying to push into Hellraiser's base. Like, I'm not sure this is ever going to be really the best thing for him, honestly, because Hellraiser is taking the rest of the map anyways. So say that Hellraiser is found out of position. He just goes, oh, that sucks, and then just moves on. It's always going to be a double whammy, and Geralt certainly is trying. DTs on the left, and the attack down the middle. I don't think Hellraiser can actually, you know, take the engagement with so many Disruptors actually available. And he might be the one that actually has to back away completely. These DTs could get another base if they knew about it. They do know about it, but they're going to try and escape instead. Yeah.
Hey, that Oracle from early game just helping to push the DTs back. That's one way to put it into use. I mean, This is the thing, though. All of a sudden, Gerald, he's stabilizing, right? 4th base back up. 5th base is about to get there. And now Hellraiser isn't in position to really deny that. Obviously, Hellraiser will probably lose the top right. That's kind of a given at this point. I don't think that's so bad. It's almost a... I want to say it's almost a bait, but he actually has like 13 probes here. So it's not great to lose in all the probes. But he is going to use it as an opportunity to move down to the bottom left and then maybe take Gerald back down to a 4-base scenario. And again, just try and stay ahead on those numbers. But there's also DTs working elsewhere, so Gerald is putting his own action on the map right now. And I just love how patient he's been, just slowly getting himself into a position where he could also put on similar pressure to what Hellraiser is doing.
It's really important that Gerald had more than one thing going, basically. I mean, he does lose the Nexus, but maybe he can still take an okay fight, an aggressive blink forward as the rest of Gerald's forces are coming forward. That might have been a mistake. Disruptors, at least one being an okay shot, but the other one kind of whiffing. And it looks like Hellraiser is going to be able to escape, but Gerald, if he can take something down with him... Oh, no, I think he was going to use his DTs to get those Disruptors, but there is an Observer available. And Hellraiser, by the way, just continues to expand. He just lost that middle left Nexus and was like, I'll just take the bottom left instead.
Yeah, it's actually amazing watching how many bases he's built up this game. It's actually incredible. He's lost 3 Nexus as well. And you think about how many he still has on the map, it's pretty impressive as the Cancer helped to turn around. And that's been a big part of this too, right? Gerald has not been afraid to overbuild static defense. And it's not even overbuilding against this amount of DTs. He's making sure he's very safe, very secure. These DTs can't be a major issue. And it has bought him a lot of time, multiple times over on different bases. I mean, hey, this bottom left base would have been dead multiple times earlier if he hadn't had all those counters and stuff in position.
For sure. A little bit of a mistake there, not taking care of an Observer, I think. That's what really confirmed to Hellraiser that he could do this, but Gerald's going to try and come in from behind. Hellraiser has sight on this, so a Disruptor dies, but at least he scouted it. So now what is Hellraiser's choice going to be? He has one single Disruptor that is going to not grab anything, actually. Barely. And that is going to force Hellraiser to try and escape, looks like through the middle. And most of his stalkers, once again, will be able to escape. I mean, that has always been the benefit of his style of play, is that it's super mobile.
Super mobile, continue to move around. He's not even trading that badly as well for having been on the worst composition. It's about 2,000 resource loss difference, and when Hellraiser's been controlling the income for 10 plus minutes, that's kind of okay. So, still liking it a lot for Hellraiser. He's got money in the bank to spend, but he still is always only going to be 1-2 bad Disruptors away from then having an army that's just not quite overwhelming, and then Geralt gets on the map with a way better army, and that's my most concerning thing for Hellraiser right now. He dives down over here, but the Disruptors are going to get those Zealots, and the Stalkers are back on the right side, but again, stack defense is buying a lot of time.
And one thing we haven't mentioned, too, is we do have some skirmishes, not based around Disruptors. The upgrades are kind of severe. Hellraiser working on 3-3-2? 3-3-3, my god, yes.
Yeah.
Completely upgraded against just 3 attack for Geralt and about to be 1 shield. So even with the static defense, for instance, in that last fight, looking like it should help his Stalkers, I mean, that is a really severe upgrade lead for Hellraiser, and that's going to be scary as Geralt finally tries to split up his army in the correct way, which has been a real struggle for him, the past 10 minutes. It's going to be actually harder than it looks.
This is, it's becoming just a really interesting game. I don't know what else does add on Zombie Grove right now. What is that? Blinks onto these Disruptors. I mean, that was not the players expecting. Well, that gives me something to talk about, because those are the kind of crazy plays that actually will keep the tech count low of his opponent, and if you do that, obviously his own army becomes better again.
I mean, Gerald is kind of stabilizing. I do wonder if maybe he's found the perfect split with the static defense helping those unupgraded Stalkers. I was kind of questioning his Colossus, but I'll get into it in a second. There are Colossus, Tempest, Immortals, and Disruptors all defending this base, so I think it is pretty safe. Although Hellraiser really wants to make it, actually questionable. I don't think it's quite going to work. So as Geralt stabilizes, it seems, he might be able to once again invest into his own harassment and finally start taking out some of Hellraiser's bases, because Hellraiser, man, he just took over the entire map. That's kind of insane. 83 workers actually efficiently mining. That's something that could definitely impact the future of this game, but Geralt's still trying to get to that perfect army. First it was that first step into Tempest, and now he's even trying to add on those carriers. If he can still slowly expand, slowly but surely, and he's certainly trying to get to that top right base, I guess he could eventually afford that, right? But it is a very tough game to get another Nexus up and running for Geralt. He's not even going to get that one up. It's canceled.
Yeah, no, it's always going to have been the issue, right? Getting to the next base along and the next base along. I think it would have become so much easier if he'd ever, for one time, just kept his army alive, right? If he kept his tech alive. But how many times now have we seen the tech removed? We see all that big set of disruptors removed. We saw the disruptors snipe just a few moments ago. And okay, like he's added some Tempest on, they never went down, but it just feels like he's never at once had the big army just to sort of take that big step forward and really stand and hold a base while not leaving other bases around the map alone and kind of, well, vulnerable. I wonder if it would have almost been better for him to go to the left side, by the way, because then he could have maybe taken 2 bases instead of this one on the right. I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I do think that's where, I think it's what he has to do, you know? Like, he's got a decent amount of stack defense to the right. It's the left that's a little more vulnerable, so why not just start moving to the left, right? Like, use your main army as your defense, right? It must be such a frustrating playstyle, you know? Like, I don't think Gerald is playing against this too often, or this severe, right? Like, we do see choices made, especially if, like, for instance, Hellraiser was behind in the early game. Maybe this is something he was forced into. But usually you don't see someone just stick with it for this long and be like, no, I'm just going to continue building stalkers. They're the best thing ever. Which apparently they are. Actually, bigger battle the bot. Oh my god, he just got so many disruptors with that. 2 disruptors left over for Gerald, and are they out of shots? No, he just actually clears everything up without him.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of really crazy moments here, there, and everywhere at this point in time. Hellraiser has just got so much money. To kind of come back to what you were saying, you're right. It's almost like this is the style you see when someone falls behind, they need to kind of get back in the game. But Hellraiser chooses to play this style from the start, and Gerald's like, man, this army, it's not meant to have to deal with nonsense like this, and yet here we are, Zealot's charged through, disruptor shots are dodged. This is the one thing that I feel has always been scary, this kind of larger army. When you're forced into a larger fight, the disruptor connects as well. I mean, Gerald finding his opportunity to come across the map, maybe this is his moment.
It's still kind of like a surprisingly fragile army, though, right? Like it's powerful and fragile, right? It's the Tempest could go down pretty quickly. The Colossus, you know, aren't actually that effective against stalkers. Like, it was something I was going to comment on earlier. It was like Colossus were an interesting choice. I would have figured either honestly more disruptors, or if you want something a little more A movie, to be honest, because you've been dealing with so much harassment, Immortals, but. He went with Colossus, but I actually think he had to be properly scared, especially because he doesn't know where the other army is. And there's an aggressive blink forward, taking out 1, 2 disruptors, but not the third one. Oh, fantastic shot there. And Gerald is going to capitalize. That is a devastating blow to the stalker count of Hellraiser, but how many gateways does this get on? 20 gateways? Oh my god, when did that happen? He can rebuild an entire army.
Yeah. He has the money to do so once or twice as well, right? I mean, the gas is kind of getting a little low. Problem is, again, now you're kind of out of disruptor shots. You got 1, maybe 2, and these stalkers can genuinely get on top of this army, and they kind of kill everything else. There's a little split away. The stalkers coming around the top side. And we're just going to be seeing the stack defense coming into play once again. As Gerald will push this back. Keeping this top right base alive has been huge for Gerald. Finally getting that extra bit of money to really keep this army running. As Hellraiser warps in a whole bunch, and yet again, Hellraiser is maxed out.
Yeah, he's not going to stop anytime soon. One thing I've been meaning to mention, but there's so many things happening. The lack of observers from Gerald, I think, has actually been really critical to Hellraiser's success, which I guess I'll hold off on again, because we still have, I guess, a never-ending battle. Hellraiser is just constantly bringing the pressure, and blink forward past that one disruptor, but the second one gets an amazing shot. No one disruptor shots left over, and one more is going to scare away the rest of Hellraiser's army. He's really trying to pierce through this, but isn't working quite enough. The Colossus can be pulled back, the Tempest pulled back, some DTs even around the action, but there's the lack of observers I was talking about. One, it feels like occasionally Geralt could have had, you know, a DT defense in certain situations if he had just had his own observers defensively placed, but they actually just been a severe lack. And then 2, all of the observers that Hellraiser has, he's going up to 10 observers, means that he knows exactly where to strike. And Geralt, instead of replacing his, I mean, how many has he made in this game? 6. I feel like you've got to have, you know, upwards of 14 or 16 against Hellraiser in the way that he plays. For me, that's an improvement for later. That top right base is so important, but it's going down to the Zealots. They are fully outwitted Zealots, and they're barely not going to get it. They get the Nexus. And Geralt can afford to remake that pretty much one more time, but Hellraiser, my god, even expanding into his opponent's bases.
Yeah, I mean, that was the next step along, because Hellraiser is trading worse than Geralt. I mean, as long as these bases don't go up for Geralt, I think Hellraiser is still okay. But obviously, even better if you actually get to mine from them a little bit, then you're taking resources away from your opponent, because the fear is eventually if Gerald mines out top right, he's just going to swing all of his attention down to the bottom side, and then he does get these bases. And if you can't kill him while he gets those bases, that's when this game will end. And in Gerald's favor, but obviously that's a long way off still, as we're already 25 minutes deep. ZG, we said this was going to be a long first game. Definitely went wrong.
Yes, you're right at least about that. I would love an Observer, man. He is on triple Robo, and I love that he's getting Immortals. I actually think it's going to be really helpful here. Really punish an aggressive blink forward, right, when you're, like, miscounting Immortals. But no Observers, finally building one more. But he, like, Hellraiser had so much free vision, and not just on the main army, but on the harassment points as well. It looks like Gerald's finally getting something done, I guess, on this side of the map, but then he's completely lost control of the bottom left, as Hellraiser just warps in a dozen Zealots and DTs. And I don't know what Gerald's game plan is here. It feels like he's just been surviving the entire 26 minutes.
Yep, Stalkers have to blink back there from Gerald as Hellraiser continues to do the top side again. It does kind of feel... I feel like I wanted to say this a couple of times now, but it does kind of feel like Gerald's army is finally there. Like it's finally better and good enough maybe to keep on taking some better fights. I say that, and obviously we're maybe about to start losing the bottom side. This is a mess of a fight over here as Hellraiser retakes these bases, or tries to at least. DT's blinking on DTs, and yeah, Hellraiser is actually going to hold these bases, which is huge. You can see that Gerald's trying to long distance mine because he realizes that he's in some trouble in terms of economy.
How do you take that out without the entirety of your army? I mean, you just don't. Not with the bank that you have. Gerald does blink forward, capture as many units as possible, but a good counter DT blink away. But as Gerald's main army moves to the bottom left, the upper right is then under fire. He left most of his disruptors up there, which seems to be an all-right response right now. But I guarantee Hellraiser is counting those shots, and he thinks he can move in. Is this actually the right call? One shot going to be quite good, but then a recall still has to be used. He's still going to lose most of his disruptors.
Yeah, again, these are costs which Gerald really can't afford anymore. Look at the money in the bank. There is no bank anymore. And that's true for Hellraiser as well, but Hellraiser has 84 probes, so the bank reappears for Hellraiser much faster. And that's where we stand. As a disruptor shot from Hellraiser goes through, Gerald has to dodge away. And we still have Gerald trying to push around this top side, but he does not have much to keep on working with. He is on his last couple of chances to maybe hold a base and to take the right fight.
You know, what's so funny, too, is that even if Geralt were to take out these bases, Hellraiser doesn't really care about them anymore. They're already mined out, which also means that Geralt can't take these bases, you know, if we're doing some kind of weird round-the-clock scenario. I mean, they're not really that important. It might eventually get important as it maybe opens up opportunities into the third the natural, right, where there's technology and production. But this first domino was not that important. And the second one also not that important. Geralt might be feeling a little bit better, but I think it's going to come down to whether or not he can take a good fight. Disruptor numbers, not very high here for Geralt, only at 3, so 2 of them already shooting is not a great sign. And then Hellraiser is even threatening a bit of a base trade to the other side of the map. You know, he's all warping in a lot over there.
Blinks forward, he's going to go for the mothership. He's blinking forward into what are, like, available disruptors. How many Stalkers has he even lost this game? Okay, I shouldn't have asked that. 192. What? That's ridiculous.
Dang, man. Dang. And 22 observers is like my favorite part about this.
I know. That's so much gas and observers.
You're right. It's so good because he doesn't use the robo for anything else, you know? Whereas Geralt, I can kind of understand, you know, at some points, I think he has had ample opportunity to make observers. You know, he's up at 8 disruptors every now and again, but other times, yes, he's been using his robos to rebuild stuff. I'm so happy to see him making immortals again. I do think that in a lot of these situations, they would have been better than the disruptors being left alone, but it might just be too late, and it still might not be the perfect option, right? We used to think, you know, 8 disruptors would be an amazing defense, and then Hellraiser is kind of proving us wrong, even still 30 minutes into this game, but it's also not quite over. This game still has some potential as Geralt finally cleans up the middle left and take that base. And if that falls, this is a more important domino, right? Then he can take the very bottom base, and that's so much more important. DT is actually taking down a couple of the disruptors while they get taken down is pretty important. And on the top side, those immortals are trying their best to help out. But, you know, Hellraiser's actually included his own disruptors here. So it's no longer just stalkers versus immortals.
And we still have this duel over the bottom side. Super battery activating, cannons staying active as well. Tempest shot still firing as the Stalkers of Hellraiser blink on in. A couple of immortals going to be picked away at, and just seeing Gerald not really making enough progress down the bottom. And now the other Stalkers show up. There's finally no disruptors here for him to blink into, so I think he's going to actually get a cleanup on this army. And then Gerald is maybe not going to have enough to do anything else with. There's so many Stalkers here, Zombie Grub. And Gerald's supply really has plummeted for the first time properly in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was potential, right? Like, if maybe he had been able to accurately assess to bring his entire army to the bottom left, but he still had so much up to the top right. I mean, he would have to play, like, seriously perfect games, and with so little information, too. I would love to go back over this 30-minute game and check out what Gerald's vision was for most of it, because I feel like he was very, very in the dark, and plenty of opportunities for DTs to get more than they actually should have. You know, it's a very good game about positioning and mini-map awareness and just map presence that's been played out here by Hellraiser. And I think Gerald, he's going to have to respect this style. But then that's so scary, right? Because Hellraiser is also, like, he's really good at cheesing. So you can't just assume he's always going to use this style and, like, prepare yourself for this. We have no idea what the next game's going to look like. But this game certainly seems like Hellraiser's got it.
Yep, can't deny this base. Obviously, pretty much everywhere else is on its way to being mined out for Gerald if it isn't already. And at this point, there's just not the splash damage to get rid of all these Stalkers, right? So a couple of mortals there go down. GG is cold, and Hellraiser has kept up this aggression for what, like 15, 20 minutes straight? And eventually wins out at the 32-minute marker on Romanticide to go up 1-0. Wow, what a way to start the day.
What a PvP, man. Kind of that developing PvP. We'd already seen some people experiment more with the not so eager to get the disruptors. I can play around someone skyrocketing up to Stargates. Like, we've seen a little bit of that, but Hellraiser seems to really be pushing the envelope here and just like saying, no, this is the actual best way to play. And perhaps it's a very map-specific thing because Romanticide is quite large side to side. So he feels like he can just do that thing where he just takes over the map. But I mean, I feel like it's a style that could also work on a map like Death Aura, for instance, which is actually going to be our next map. It's still quite large, but certainly an easier 4 bases to take. I mean, Romantice's not like super difficult, but Death Aura is kind of our most set up macro map.
Yeah, just in case you want more of the same. Do you think Hellraiser just runs around this map as well, Zombie Grub? Like, is that a thing? Like it is on Romanticide? Because I do feel like Romanticide has a lot more freedom in moving and like rotating around, whereas Death Aura, you're kind of on the left or you're on the right a little bit more. Like, I know you can obviously say that about Romanticide too, but the width of Romanticide means it's almost like that central aisle as well. Whereas the center in Death Aura is just a zigzag, right? It's like, there's not really anything to do there. So I feel like you're a bit more limited in where you can go as Hellraiser if you want to play the same style.
Yep. No, I absolutely agree. I think that Romanticide is the best example of a map for that, what Hellraiser does. But I don't think Death Aura is impossible either. I do kind of feel like on this map, Hellraiser might try and push more into like a mid-game 2 or 3 base attack, as we've seen in the past from him. And that's something that Gerald's going to have to respect. As I was saying at the end of game 1, is that Hellraiser shows that he has this kind of, you know, new or developing style, whatever you want to call it, that he seems to be very, very good with, right? He's the one that's pushing it most often, at the very least. And then you also have a Hellraiser who's known for like his cannon rushes or his void ray shenanigans or just like his all lanes in the mid game, because PvP has plenty of different times to all in your opponent and plenty of tech choices to go down. So it's like you already had 20 things to worry about when it came to defeating Hellraiser, and now there's this new thing that's, you know, more macro oriented, and you still got to be scared of that. Didn't expect to come in here and be so impressed by Hellraiser again. You know, I was like, oh, against Mana, maybe people study it, it's okay, but no, apparently not. Apparently, Hellraiser really is just figuring out some good PvP.
He certainly is. We're going to start up in the top left-hand side with the man who's up 1-0 in the blue. It's Hellraiser.
In the bottom right, as the red Protoss, he is Gerald.
I wonder if Gerald has almost a different approach in game number 2 as well. I mean, Gerald was unfortunately kind of forced into what he did as well, right? Because he lost probes early to those oracles. And 6 probes, it might not seem like a lot, but in a mirrored matchup especially, it really is a case of all of a sudden you're down in workers, you're never going to have like the army to push across the map and do something, and you kind of have to start playing your opponent's game, and so he couldn't do anything to disrupt Hellraiser early on, and it almost felt like the momentum for Hellraiser started super early on in the game with those oracles.
Absolutely. I think it's a style that would work even if he was like in an okay position and or an even position. And then I think it's a style that we see people desperately cling on to if they're behind. You know, they can't quite afford to get those disruptors. But I do think it's probably like the best case scenario is that you stop anything from happening, right? Like you stop any potential later third nexus or later fourth nexus even. And Hellraiser immediately feels confident about getting on the map when he wants to because he gets that lead. If he's a little more scared perhaps leading into those fourth base scenarios, then maybe it's a very different looking game. But I gotta say, even last game where he did get that lead, he didn't necessarily take full advantage of it. You know, he probably could have been on the map earlier. He probably didn't have to slap down. I think it ended up being 4 or 5 stasis traps defensively, right? Because yeah, he was pretty well set up on 3 bases and then tentatively took a 4th, but I guess that's where he really gets supercharged. Maybe that's where he really feels confident, starting to make those risky maneuvers against disruptors is when he is on a comfortable 4 bases. But it's a style that we're going to, I think, see continue to develop. PvP's been changing all the time, it feels like, in the last 2 or 3 years. But as we move into less proxies and less like +2 timings, right, thankfully, this last year of PvP has really been a treat just to see how much people can work with more of the longer macro games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This year of PvP has been like, wow. Like, I think we've seen more. I reckon the average length of game for matchup is probably the longest for PvP than anything else, right? It's how many times have we seen like epic back and forth games? And the thing is, it's never like a boring PvP, right? I think I casted one time Gung Fu Bandit playing Need that was an hour long, and I did kind of want to like just F10N. But apart from that, like pretty much always, it's been exciting back and forth, disruptors, DTs, everything. I think it's become a lot of people's favorite mirror matchup, if not favorite matchup sometimes even.
Absolutely. Certainly has become one of mine. Now we got something a little bit interesting happening. Hellraiser once again with the 1 base Stargate opener after Stalkers. Isn't that surprising? Oh, Gerald is unfortunately already moving with his adepts. But then Gerald really changes things up, and he adds on, he did add on, I'm sorry, he canceled it, my bad. I swear I didn't imagine a robo, but maybe thinking he was going to be contained a little bit more, or was even thinking about one of those kind of cheeky like Warp Prism pushes, but now actually does add on just a Nexus and a Twilight Council, so actually very similar to last game, and I guess the difference is can Geralt this time take, smaller damage, like, or no damage, I guess, from the Oracles. I guess Twilight Council is much faster, isn't it? Right, and Forge is definitely faster for Geralt.
Yeah, this time's gone a lot better, a lot smoother for him. I think I'm not 100% sure why exactly, but last game he was ahead by like 2, 3, 4 seconds on Blink, right? And he was super behind on the +1. Mm-hmm. This time is a bit different. This time Hellraiser is only a single Oracle as well, by the way. I think we saw a lot of Stalker pressure last time around, right? And it was a bit back and forth, and maybe that just kind of throws you, make a couple extra units that you didn't actually need to make. Hellraiser gets into the main, and wow, that's an interesting cancel on the shade. I feel like it's almost always worth shading. And with the Adepts, even if they get like, because it's not going to get, an Adept's not going to get 1 hit, right? So it's going to get at least 2 probes. I feel like that's usually always worth the commitment.
Yeah, it's always tricky though. I mean, if you can actually get into the mineral line, I think it's pretty worth it. If you're just like a little outside and the army's there, I guess I can understand the question mark there.
I feel like the first time he was in though, right? Like, to me, he was like right on top. Maybe he just didn't feel like he was deep enough. Like this time, he's definitely going to go. But he hits the sentry first, and then he's out of sync for the first probe, so he'll only get 1 kill. That could have been 3 kills. So that was just a little bit of a miss micro from him.
All right, Dark Shrine is coming down. I saw the pylon and thought maybe he just used it to warp in later on, but that probe stuck around, didn't it? Actually similar for Geralt. Now, Geralt might actually be using this as an aggressive blink attack, where you just warp in consistently as opposed to moving on and trying to surprise your opponent in that fashion. It'd be hilarious if you're also doing a Dark Shrine, but I don't expect it in that positioning. Yeah, it's a gateway. So this is a big problem then. If Geralt is going to say, I'm not going to get a robo, that's something I'm going to cut away from my build because instead I'm going to go for a proxy gateway, that's problematic. I mean, if he was going for a macro build, if you were thinking about a third Nexus, you might You might add on a Robo, like right now, just as like the game progresses, right? But with that proxy gateway, I think this is one of the latest. Oh no, he's gonna get it. Okay, all right. I don't know if he saw anything suspicious. I don't think he's seen anything at all, actually. Very little scouting. He just gets it at a good time, thankfully.
He has a cannon as well, right? So it's like, I mean, at least he would have had something against the DTs in the first place. I was about to say that the Robo is not in a good position, actually, because it's at the front, but then with the cannon behind it, maybe it's all right. Let's see how many DTs warp in. Let's see what actually comes out of this. The only thing is, obviously, across the map, DTs can defend very well here for the moment, so, you know, one DT defensively should shut down the Stalker pressure and give Hellraiser a little bit more breathing room as he tries to set up onto that third base much faster than, well, I say much faster, a few seconds faster than Gerald.
I wonder if this is just from experience, you know, because his scouting is so limited that it might just be like, yep, I've died, you know, far too easily to this before. So a single cannon could have really been the difference, plus the observer timing from the Robo. So DTs are going to grab the third Nexus. Not something that Gerald also could have grabbed, but the way that he's positioned his proxy, it's like kind of awkward to then move all the way over to the right. I think he's got to grab it though. Yeah.
Yeah, if you've had your own cancelled, right? Otherwise, Hellraiser just gets way ahead, because then he's already a few workers ahead. They actually get to mine properly. Then you're building an extra worker every single time. It's not even worth building workers as Gerald. I mean, in the end now, Gerald's actually going to end up on the faster third base. So, I mean, just take it to the right-hand side too, so away from where those DTs warped in before.
All right, kind of a funky mid-game here, you know? Like, with the cannon available, the DTs probably weren't going to do so much, although one of them definitely could have snuck into the main base. And then the Robo timing was fine. And then the Blink Stalker attack could have been scarier, but it really wasn't that much of a surprise. It wasn't that much more, I should say, than what Hellraiser was already warping in himself, plus the just a little bit with the DT. So it wasn't enough to actually push through, which sometimes it can be. And Gerald is just like, okay, I'll take the third and walk away. Maybe use the proxy gateway or something else later, but we are actually going into a fairly even mid-game. Now, Gerald is a little behind on the workers, but his Nexus is faster. His Stalkers are currently in stasis, and that's a little scary, but it's kind of a hard Stalker count to determine. Yeah, he's got a blink, so. Well, yeah, maybe Gerald doesn't take that fight. Okay.
Yeah. Has to back away there in the end. Hellraiser just supply blocked and everything, right? It's not turned into a pretty game for him at all. Gerald's got the army supply. He's not really behind on the upgrades or anything. It just feels much smoother for Gerald here, as he's going to shade a depth spy. That's a good threat to have. He's actually going to split 2 and 2, 2 into the natural, 2 in the main. If nothing else, going to keep units busy. He's going to start getting some probe kills.
Yeah, not too many. A good defensive warp in of units that I guess he was, planning on warping anyway. So 4 probes or 4 adepts is, exactly what you would want, but certainly a distraction. And I do think that Hellraiser's macro was the one that slipped a bit more. I'm glad you pointed out that supply block, because I certainly didn't notice it at first. So Gerald managed to get ahead in workers, has fallen a little bit behind in the army supply, though, as he's the one moving out with the Stalkers. That is pretty important to note. But he's got that proxy gateway, so that could change. He's going to have surprisingly fast warp-ins. I guess Hellraiser just didn't ever scout the proxy gateway, yeah? he's so close to it so far.
Yeah, going to see a bit of a Stalker fight here. +2 is actually already done from Hellraiser. So for right now, Hellraiser's maybe a little bit better set up to take a fight. He's got +2. There's that 1 or more from Gerald, but you know what? Hellraiser got a bit more army supply. He has the vision, so does Gerald. They both see each other's army via Revelation / an Observer. Okay. Feels as though we're just going to get into like a little bit of a stalemate setup for now, which means that Gerald will get up his disruptors. Hellraiser will get up his army to start running around the map like crazy. And we start a repeat game number 1. I
think we are going to have that. But, what you were talking about during the not break, but in between the maps was really important, that the avenues of attack are split more on Death Ore. It is either left or right, and the middle doesn't have that direct access. It has more direct access, though, once you tear down these rocks, which I'm glad to see that Hellraiser is the one doing that. Gerald's once again trying to add on Colossus, and the best thing I could think of for Colossus was that, yes, it would help against CT Zealot, but that they have that range, right? So they can sit behind the stack defense. I'm guessing that's what he's thinking of. But if this is going to really be like last game, I want to see some more mortals, and I want to make sure that, at least an observer in every base, right? Or around every base, I should say. Because that's where Hellraiser really started to dig in. Big warp into the main base, takes out the cannon. I don't know if he recalled the observer as well.
I don't
that's a little
see
awkward. That's awkward.
Yeah.
That's super awkward. On the left side, his next is definitely going to be canceled.
Oh my god, the Immortal didn't go down, so the Immortal actually gets to survive on like 1 HP. DT's going to sit in the corner. Now he finds the Colossus for free, though, and you know what? The Robo is right there, Zombie Grub. He has got to deal with pressure across the map, but what if he actually just goes and gets the third base? Because the recall's already been used, right? So, okay, a few Stalkers blink down. This is worth it for Hellraiser, no doubt about it. Take your opponent down to 2 bases while you'll be on 3. Yeah, that's fine. He loses his 4th base, but obviously it's now 3 versus 2. So Hellraiser got into a pretty good spot there. I honestly don't think I like the Colossus because the DT Zealot's just not a threat yet, right? It's Stalkers, and I don't see the Colossus doing that much against the Stalkers this early on.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. I think the Colossus is kind of one of those, like, theoretically, right, in a perfect scenario when he once again has that defense and it's just like sitting behind that, I think it could really help, but we're not quite there yet. Disruptor is not even the way to go. We have more Immortals. Now, I like that Geralt double expands. First of all, he had 1,000 minerals, so he could afford it. And second of all, I do think he needs to kind of do something risky to catch up. But it's going to be difficult to keep those 4 bases alive against the Hellraiser that you know is going to try and harass you. I mean, Geralt's trying to keep up his own harassment, and just a handful of Stalkers getting 1 cancel and now getting a couple of probes is at least something to distract his opponent because he desperately needs it. Geralt is down 20 supply, and he's about to be down in upgrades too with another Chrono from Hellraiser. That 1 Disruptor he has didn't get anything at all. And this is also an awkward position for Geralt to fight in. The concave is much better for Hellraiser.
Yeah, it's one of those weird bases where the aggressor has the advantage, right? And because they're not meant to be able to get up the ramp, but if you get up the ramp, the advantage is yours, and Hellraiser gets that cancel. So, again, as he holds his base back at home, it goes from 3 versus 2 to 4 versus 3 bases. He's staying ahead of base this entire time. And these are meant to be the easy bases for Geralt to take, right? These are meant to be bases that get up without issue. And right now, he is having a lot of issues. And it all came down to the Prism in the main, because it pulled him away from the left/right side defensively, and that opened the door as Hellraiser back in. That's a kill, no cancel. He even gets one of the pylons. He has just used his blinks. He has to be careful of the disruptors, and also maybe how he's going to get out of here, but he's going to kill one disruptor now. Blink is available, and he blinks backwards.
Yeah, pulling away with that disruptor, thinking he's going to be chased after. Still fighting that one. I think what Geralt was trying to do was find the army ahead of time and then think, oh, I have disruptors on the high ground, so I'll be fine. But the timing just never is in his favor because he's lacking that information. Hellraiser, even like very intentionally in some of these fights, has been targeting the Observer and not just let his DTs do more damage, but to make sure that his opponent doesn't know that he's over on the right side still, just chilling. That is 2 killed Nexuses. That's absolutely terrible. Geralt can afford this as long as he doesn't trade out his army as well, right? Like, that's always been the thing about disruptors. If they can live, great. You know, we'll eventually replace that Nexus, and I'll just keep an army that's okay, but not getting any bigger. But Hellraiser's also been doing a pretty decent job of trading out army as well, taking down these disruptors, taking down the Stalker fights. So, once again, Geralt is in that desperate position. It is rather similar to our last map.
Yep, no, it's really playing out in a very similar way. And you can see Hellraiser starting to get into the groove now. 5th base gets started over on the left-hand side. And everything just starts to come up really nicely here. Comes together really well for Hellraiser, who's maxed out. So he wants to keep on fighting. Obviously not into disruptor shots like that, though. He's going to just eat straight up.
The amount of zealots he's moving over there. It's insane. Oh, no, the disruptors. Okay. A little bit scary when it's the disruptors on the front line that are shooting. But one got targeted down, the other one not quite, so he had to blink away. Hellraiser still wants to push this avenue, but it does get, ideally gets scarier and scarier, I guess, for Geralt's defense. You know, he's supposed to have more disruptors, he's supposed to have more units being warped in. He just can't really afford to do either one. Just a couple more disruptors, a Colossus that may or may not help. A big surround coming here from Hellraiser as Geralt's left side army had no idea this was Hellraiser's intention. Now Geralt's half army is going to die, and then the other half of the army is going to show up late to the party.
Oh my god, he's going to get the base, going to get the disruptor, and he's going to leave. This is great. It's when you've got your opponent split in 2 places, right? And then you're like, you know what? I've been doing the same thing for a while. Let's just completely change it. What if I just bring everything to one position? Because not only do I catch you outnumbered, I full on flank you, right? And he killed, he got the Colossus, all the disruptors. I don't even want to talk about how many times this base has died Zombie Grub. I think that's 3 times in a row it's been cancelled, and then there was another one, killed off, not cancelled. It's been cancelled a few times. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and I said, like, he could maybe replace his base as long as he's not losing his army, but he keeps on losing his army. He's down to 1 disruptor. This Colossus just feels like it's not going to help. I do appreciate the 3 disruptors on the production tab. I do, but I got to harp on the Observer thing again. Like, all of these situations they begin because he doesn't know what his opponent is setting up to do. If he had an observer in the middle of that choke point, right? Like he'd be like, oh, he's setting up for a flank, and he would have reacted faster and potentially had his own flank, as opposed to the awkward engagement that it was. But he can't do it. Observers keep getting sniped. He doesn't have his own oracles, and even then, keeping them alive would be very difficult to do. So now, he's recognized that problem, but it's a hard problem to fix, and your opponent is so mobile and so.
Yeah.
Literally all their production goes into observers because they're just remaxing on gateway units. So he's trying with a pylon right now. That gets instantly bopped. And I don't. It's gonna be. I think whoever figures out how to keep tabs on Hellraiser's army is gonna do much better against them. But man, that is difficult to do. Using your disruptors on your own army basically because of the zealots is not comfortable either. One disruptor shot on the stalkers hitting very nicely, but the disruptors now running into the stalkers. Easy peasy cleanups there for Hellraiser. Gerald blinks on top, tries to get the full advantage of that army fight, but at the expense of all of his disruptors, it's not worth it.
It would have been fine, right, if then he didn't lose the 4 disruptors that just moved commanded forward at the end. That's the problem. Some of these fights have been sloppy from Gerald, and there's just no real fix in that other than kind of just being like, play a bit better. Like, it's kind of a brutal thing to say, but you can't just let your disruptors wander in when they're not firing or anything, If they're caught in the front lines, they're trying to get a shot off, whatever, but they're just derping forward ahead of the rest of the army. Disruptors are not meant to be tanks, so mistakes there. I like these DTs trying to get around. They may get in for some damage, and then there's so many cannons, so maybe not. Attempting to get in over here again, Hellraiser, but we're already talking about a Hellraiser who's now on 7 bases against this 4th base, which has got a minuscule amount of health left.
Yeah, it almost was shot down right there, but Hellraiser miscalculating a little bit. Did take an awful, pretty bad engagement, but just in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter because not only is on that many bases, Wardy, he's also on 94 workers. So his bank is, it's not a bank yet, but it is very consistent income. It's also being used to continue to improve his stalkers. So again, having that scenario like last game where just like, stalker wars really are not even. It is currently 3-2 against 3-1, so it's not terrible yet, but of course Hellraiser can afford to add on whatever he wants. He could even go into disruptors if he wants. He could go into his own Tempest if he wants. As he has the map, he has control, and Geralt is just trying to survive, which, hey, he's done it again. He is hanging on by a thread, but he is hanging on.
Yes, indeed. Hellraiser is maxed out. Looking around, he's got those disruptors of his own that are going to force a blink back as well. I don't know. Oh, no. Those disruptors as well. Come on. Just in case it's not already bad enough, right?
Yeah. And the 5th base, it's kind of as difficult as Romanticide, I guess, right? You got to actually reach out and grab it, which leaves that left side very open, which eventually Hellraiser is going to use all of those Zealots and DTs. My God. I don't know what defends that, actually. Geralt, I think he needed to put his Colossus over to the left, which might have been their original intention, but now they're being used as part of the main army, so that left side might just die. Oh, another good fight. Another good trade for Hellraiser.
Yep, that's another disruptor shot that hits some sentries, hits a disruptor. I love this huge TT flank that just comes in. Oh, but the Stalkers, well, they blink last second. But look how much is going down. I feel like I've said this so many times, but every single time it feels like we're talking about units from Geralt just dying, Hellraiser getting good picks. He's lucky these 2 Colossi are still alive, and even then, I'm not sure what he's exactly going to do with them. That's a good disruptor shot. At least Geralt gets a win. He'll blink forward for some disruptors. Hey, Geralt's actually getting to kill some stuff, which is a nice change of pace, but it doesn't really change how the overall game is heading.
Yeah, and his gas income is becoming really questionable. Actually, he never saturated his natural again, which is problematic, but his main's out of gas. He's going to lose his 4th Nexus again, so he can't even replace Stalkers, man. He is actually going to only be able to replace charge lots, which, actually aren't the worst thing. There's units that are going to hopefully help against any of Hellraiser's aggressive Blinkins, right? He blinks into 20 Zealots, that's not usually a great thing, or 5 Immortals, that's not usually a great thing. But, Hellraiser then just plays around it, doesn't he? He just kind of makes the Zealots move into him and then picks them off one by one. They're not usually the core of your army. They are more harassments, and I don't know how Geralt out-harasses his opponent, especially after losing all of his disruptors. He knows that's probably it. He cannot replace all of that.
I'm just looking at the units kill tab again. There's 22 disruptors dead for Geralt in the game. It's just numbers that you can't really get over again and again and again. When you're on a less amount of bases. And this second game is, I think, fair to say, more dominant than the first because Hellraiser's just not let Gerald get out of the 4-base scenario. You know, eventually Gerald even at least had some attempts of a 5th base in the first game before he finally got it up. This time it's just nothing going for him at all. He is just sat back, 4 bases. Yeah, Hellraiser can't kill him in a straight up move, but he can chip away at him again and again, and eventually Gerald will just have nothing left.
It's a suffocating playstyle, man. You know, first you delay their bases so they can't have as much static defense, which means that their other bases get hit again and harder, which means that they can't afford as much static or harassment. Well, that's a good shot. So it's no static defense and then no room for harassment, which means Hellraiser just gets all of the map and can trade out as poorly as he would like. And then, you know, eventually you're hoping for this amazing disruptor shot, but it can't really be so effective. You know, Disruptor's taking out 10 Stalkers, usually, you know, it's freaking amazing. But when you're facing Hellraiser in the position that he's been in these past 2 games, it's actually like, meh, 10 Stalkers? Easy. I got 20 gateways. Like, I don't care. And that's really changing the way that we usually, you know, see PvP, which is so Disruptor-based and such the kingmaker, right? And it's like, not even. Hellraiser's like adding things in as flavor. He doesn't even really care, it seems, for his Disruptors, which is still a great shot. Oh,
yeah. I mean, we've got the other half of the army of Hellraiser on the way over, by the way. So for half a moment here, it maybe seemed as though like Gerald's kind of getting a cleanup, but nope. Then everything else shows up. Disruptor shots will fly into nothing. Grats and GG.